January 14th, 1940, North Sea, 18 miles east of Harwich. The merchant vessel SS Willow Park shuddered violently as the explosion tore through her hull. The sound came not as a bang, but as a monstrous metallic crack that echoed across the winter sea. Steel plates buckled, rivets sheared. The keel broke like a dry twig. 12 seconds later, the 4,115-ton freighter was gone, taking 15 sailors to their deaths in the frigid North Sea. The cause: no torpedo track, no submarine periscope, no warning. Just the silent, patient weapon that had been waiting on the seabed. A German magnetic mine. Captain William Davies, pulled from the water an hour later, his lips blue and fingers white with cold, described it perfectly. "She just broke in half, sir. Like someone snapped a pencil." The SS Willow Park represented merely one entry in an increasingly dire ledger. Since November 1939, German magnetic mines had sunk 27 British merchant ships totaling 121,000 tons of shipping. Each week the numbers grew. Each week the Admiralty's concern deepened. The Germans had deployed an invisible underwater blockade around Britain, a country that imported 55 million tons of goods annually and could survive barely 6 weeks without maritime supply. Winston Churchill, newly appointed as First Lord of the Admiralty, pounded his fist on polished oak during an emergency meeting at Whitehall. "Gentlemen," he growled, "the magnetic mine threatens our very survival. I want a solution at all costs. Damn the physics. Damn the conventional wisdom. Britain expects the impossible, and you shall deliver it." The conventional wisdom Churchill dismissed reflected established scientific understanding. Steel ships inevitably became magnetized through a combination of Earth's magnetic field and the hammering stresses of construction. This magnetic signature triggered the German mines when vessels passed overhead. The Germans believed their weapon fundamentally unsolvable. You might as well command the tide to stop as demand a steel vessel cease being magnetic. What the Germans considered impossible, a small team of British scientists was about to achieve. Their solution would require something science textbooks of the era explicitly forbade, a technique considered theoretically unworkable that would effectively erase the magnetic signature of thousands of vessels. It would become one of the war's most closely guarded secrets. 4 weeks before the Willow Park's destruction, on a foggy December morning in 1939, a telephone rang in the office of Charles Goodeve, a 35-year-old physical chemist at University College London. Born in Manitoba, Canada, in 1904, Goodeve had come to Britain in 1925 on a scholarship, eventually becoming a specialist in magnetic and optical phenomena. When war seemed inevitable, he volunteered his services to the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve, receiving a commission as Lieutenant Commander. The voice on the telephone belonged to Admiral Sir Martin Dunbar-Nasmyth, Director of Naval Construction. "Goodeve? Dunbar-Nasmyth here. I need you at the Admiralty immediately. We're facing a crisis that requires your particular expertise. How quickly can you be here?" Goodeve glanced at his calendar, then at the pile of papers to be graded. "1 hour, sir." "Make it 30 minutes, the Admiral replied, and hung up. That phone call would launch the most extraordinary scientific countermeasure of the early war years, one that would save countless ships and lives through principles that conventional science considered impossible. The Germans had deployed their secret weapon. Now Britain would respond with one of their own. December 7th, 1939. HMS Vernon, Portsmouth Naval Base. Charles Goodeve removed his naval cap as he entered the converted drill hall. The vast space, once used for marching sailors, now buzzed with the energy of scientific innovation. Drafting tables lined the walls, oscilloscopes flickered. Electrical coils of various sizes sat on workbenches beside magnetometers and stacks of technical papers. This was the headquarters of what would soon be officially designated the Directorate of Miscellaneous Weapon Development, dubbed Wheezers and Dodgers by naval wits, a collection of scientists, engineers, and naval officers tasked with solving problems conventional military thinking couldn't touch. Goodeve had assembled an unlikely team. Dr. Edward Thomas, Tom Tuck, a 36-year-old Cambridge physicist with a reputation for brilliant experimental design. Lieutenant Commander Neville Shute Norway, better known to the public as novelist Neville Shute, whose engineering background proved invaluable. Harold Goff, a 29-year-old metallurgist whose understanding of steel's magnetic properties would become essential. None had military backgrounds before the war. All had declined comfortable university positions to serve. "Gentlemen," Goodeve announced, spreading photographs across the central table, "this is our enemy." The images showed a cylindrical object approximately 5 feet long and 21 inches in diameter, its casing split open to reveal complex internal mechanisms. The Germans call it a Grundmine. We're designating it Type G. The previous month, on November 23rd, a German aircraft had dropped a mine that landed not in water but in mudflats at Shoeburyness during low tide. Lieutenant Commander John Overy and his team had defused it at extraordinary personal risk, working gingerly with non-magnetic tools while standing in knee-deep mud. One wrong move would have obliterated them instantly. "The mine contains 670 pounds of high explosive," Goodeve continued, pointing to the internal chambers. "But this is what makes it deadly." He indicated a metal rod running through the center of the device. A magnetized needle suspended in alcohol. When disturbed by a ship's magnetic field passing overhead, it tilts, completing an electrical circuit that detonates the charge. Tuck studied the mechanism closely. "Elegant in its simplicity," he muttered. "And devastating in its effectiveness," Goodeve added. "The Germans are dropping these by aircraft and laying them with submarines. Traditional minesweeping is useless. They don't need contact to explode." The problem's scale became immediately apparent. Britain had 2,500 merchant ships and nearly 900 naval vessels that required protection. Each represented thousands of tons of magnetized steel. Conventional scientific wisdom held that permanently magnetized materials could not be demagnetized without drastic measures such as heating beyond the Curie point, approximately 770 degree years for iron, utterly impractical for ships. The team first attempted to solve the problem using large permanent magnets attached to wooden minesweepers. The results proved disappointing. The magnetic fields were too weak, the coverage inconsistent. "We're thinking about this incorrectly," Tuck announced late one night, as rain pelted the windows of HMS Vernon. "We don't need to demagnetize the ships permanently. We need to neutralize their magnetic signature by creating an equal and opposite field." "That's explicitly forbidden in the textbooks," Guff objected. "The mathematics show—" "Damn the textbooks," Goodeve interrupted, echoing Churchill's words. "The Germans believe it impossible. That's precisely why we must attempt it." That moment marked the conceptual breakthrough, a forbidden trick that would soon evolve into one of the war's most successful countermeasures. They would use physics to make massive steel vessels magnetically invisible to German mines. The race against time had begun. January 15th, 1940. Workshop the number 7, HMS Vernon. The first experimental degaussing rig looked deceptively simple. Copper wire coiled around a 6-foot steel bar. Tom Tuck connected the final wire to the power supply, his hands steady despite having worked 20 hours straight. Outside, air raid sirens wailed as German bombers approached Portsmouth. Inside, the team continued their work. "Amperes rising," called Tuck, watching the gauges. 10, 15, 20. The room's lights dimmed as the coil drew power. Goodeve held a compass near the steel bar, watching the needle. At 25 amperes, the needle began to waver. "More," Goodeve ordered. 30. 35. At 40 amperes, the compass needle swung wildly, then settled, pointing away from the bar. "It's working," whispered Guff. "We've reversed the magnetic polarity." The principle was elegant. Electricity flowing through coiled wire creates a magnetic field. By wrapping wire around a ship's hull and running current through it, They could generate a magnetic field that would cancel out the ship's natural magnetism. The technique, called degaussing, after Carl Friedrich Gauss, who pioneered electromagnetic theory, would effectively erase a vessel's magnetic signature. "Now for the hard part," Goodeve said, "scaling this up to a 10,000-ton warship." The following day, they received permission to test their theory on HMS Board, a 500-ton minesweeper. Naval electricians wrapped heavy-gauge copper cables around the ship's hull, crossing them in careful patterns. The power requirements were enormous, nearly 1,500 amperes, enough to power a small town. "Energizing now," called the chief electrician. Tuck stood on the dock with a specialized magnetometer, measuring the ship's field before and after treatment. The readings told a clear story. The board's magnetic signature had dropped by 85%. "It works," Tuck announced, handing Goodeve the readings. But the effect only lasts about 24 hours before the ship's natural magnetism reasserts itself. The team quickly developed two solutions. For immediate protection, ships would undergo wiping, a temporary degaussing treatment at port. For longer-term defense, permanent degaussing coils would be installed aboard vessels, allowing crews to generate protective fields on demand. By February 1940, the first degaussing stations appeared in key ports across Britain. The procedure looked almost magical to observers. Massive cable loops were passed over ships from stem to stern, carrying controlled bursts of current that realigned their magnetic fields. Each treatment required precise calculations based on the vessel's size, construction, and magnetic signature. Training posed another challenge. The team rapidly developed instruction manuals and trained civilian technicians, many of them former electricians, to operate the equipment. Within weeks, the first protected convoys sailed from British ports. The results came swiftly. In March 1940, magnetic mine casualties dropped by 60%. By April, they had fallen by 80%. Shipping lanes that had been death traps became navigable again. German naval intelligence noticed the change immediately, but struggled to understand the cause. Their mines were functioning perfectly. The British ships simply stopped triggering them. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the German submarine fleet, ordered an investigation. But for months the mystery remained unsolved. At HMS Vernon, Goodeve's team continued refining their techniques. They discovered that a ship's magnetic signature varied depending on its heading relative to Earth's magnetic field. A vessel sailing north-south required different treatment than one sailing east-west. The team developed complex mathematical models to account for these variations. By mid-1940, the silent battle against magnetic mines had shifted decisively in Britain's favour. What German naval engineers had considered impossible had been achieved through scientific ingenuity and desperate innovation. The forbidden trick was working. July 1941. Atlantic convoy, HX-133, 600 miles east of Newfoundland. The convoy of 58 merchant ships ploughed through heavy North Atlantic swells, their grey hulls rising and falling against the slate-coloured horizon. Aboard the lead escort vessel, HMS Campbelltown, Lieutenant John Peters monitored the degaussing system, now standard equipment on Allied warships. The control panel showed steady current flowing through three separate coil systems, one for vertical protection, one for athwartship, side-to-side protection, and one for longitudinal, bow-to-stern protection. "Maintaining field integrity at 95%, sir," Peters reported to the captain. "All ships in convoy showing proper degaussing signatures." What had begun as an emergency countermeasure in British home waters had expanded into a global system. By mid-1941, over 3,700 merchant vessels and nearly all Allied warships had received degaussing protection. Installation teams worked around the clock in ports from Halifax to Singapore, racing to protect the vital shipping that sustained the Allied war effort. The system's effectiveness prompted German adaptations. In March 1941, Admiral Dönitz authorized the deployment of more sensitive magnetic mines calibrated to detect even the faint magnetic signatures of degaussed ships. The German-type GR mine could detect signatures 1/5 as strong as their original mines, once again threatening protected vessels. Within weeks, British intelligence obtained fragments of the new mines from minesweeping operations. Goodeve's team analysed the new trigger mechanisms and recalibrated degaussing systems accordingly, increasing power to the coils by 40%. The scientific duel continued, with each side seeking advantage through increasingly sophisticated technology. "It's an electromagnetic chess game," Goodeve told his team at HMS Vernon. "They adjust, we counter-adjust." By autumn 1941, permanent degaussing installations became standard in shipyards throughout the Allied nations. American shipyards, preparing for the possibility of war, began installing degaussing coils in every new vessel. The technical specifications travelled under diplomatic seal to Washington, marked "most secret" by British officers' hand only. The human toll of this silent battle rarely made headlines. In Liverpool, electrical engineer Alan Morrison supervised the installation of degaussing equipment on the merchant vessel SS Comorin during a German air raid. "We can't stop work," Morrison told his team as bombs fell nearby. "Every hour this ship sits unprotected is another hour she's vulnerable." A near-miss bomb exploded 50 yards away, shattering windows and spraying the workers with glass. Morrison suffered cuts to his face, but continued working. The team completed the installation at 3:47 a.m., and the Comorin sailed with the morning tide. 3 weeks later, the Comorin's captain reported passing directly over a magnetic minefield off the Norwegian coast, identified by a minesweeper afterward. The ship detected no explosions. The degaussing system had worked perfectly, saving 41 crew members and 6,000 tons of critical supplies. Similar stories multiplied across the Atlantic. The American tanker SS Patrick Henry activated its newly installed degaussing system while crossing a known minefield near Gibraltar. The ship's magnetic detector registered the presence of at least 3 mines directly beneath the keel, none of which detonated. By December 1941, with American entry into the war, degaussing technology transferred officially to the US Navy. Standardized systems appeared on Liberty ships, Victory ships, and naval vessels produced in American shipyards. Admiral Ernest King ordered establishment of dedicated degaussing stations at every major East and West Coast port. The silent battle against magnetic mines had become a global scientific effort, with thousands of technicians, engineers, and scientists working to perfect what had once been considered impossible. Ships that should have been destroyed sailed onward, their magnetic signatures erased by the forbidden trick that had become standard naval practice. January 1944. Allied Naval Headquarters, London. Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay studied the scale model of the Normandy coastline spread across the planning table. Small wooden blocks representing warships, landing craft, and minesweepers surrounded the miniature beaches codenamed Gold, Juno, Omaha, Utah, and Sword. The largest amphibious invasion in history would require crossing waters the Germans had saturated with mines, many of them magnetic. "The degaussing systems must be operating at peak efficiency," Ramsay told his assembled staff. Every vessel, from the largest battleship to the smallest landing craft. One detonation could disrupt the entire landing sequence. By early 1944, degaussing had evolved from emergency countermeasure to sophisticated naval science. The strategic impact extended far beyond simple ship protection. The technology had fundamentally altered the naval equation, neutralizing what had been Germany's most effective sea denial weapon. Convoy routes through the North Atlantic, previously deadly gauntlets, became manageable with degaussed vessels and minesweeper escorts. Supply lines to Britain, the Soviet Union, and North Africa remained open despite German efforts. Statistics told the story clearly. Before degaussing, magnetic mines destroyed an average of 15 ships per week. After implementation, losses fell to fewer than 2 per week, a 90% reduction. By 1944, an estimated 1,450 vessels had been saved through the technology, preserving approximately 14,500 sailors' lives and 7.2 million tons of critical shipping. The technology continued to evolve. British and American engineers developed the Double L sweep, a specialized mine sweeping system that mimicked a ship's magnetic signature to trigger mines safely. Purpose-built vessels called degassing ships generated massive magnetic fields that cleared channels through minefields. The MMS, Motor Minesweepers class vessels, 255 of which were built during the war, incorporated advanced degaussing technology that allowed them to operate in heavily mined coastal waters. For D-Day preparations, the Admiralty established dedicated degaussing stations at every port involved in the operation. Ships received specialized treatment calibrated to the specific magnetic conditions of the English Channel and Normandy coast. Engineers developed portable degaussing systems for landing craft too small for permanent installations. Every detail was meticulously planned. The program's secrecy remained paramount. Personnel working on degaussing systems signed the Official Secrets Act and received only the information necessary for their specific tasks. The Germans knew degaussing existed, but struggled to understand its precise implementation. This knowledge gap allowed Allied navies to maintain their technological edge throughout the war. Churchill, in a classified memo to the War Cabinet dated March 12, 1944, acknowledged the program's impact. The silent battle against the magnetic mine represents one of our greatest scientific achievements. Without this technology, our maritime position would have been untenable. The men responsible deserve the highest recognition, though such recognition must, by necessity, remain largely private for now. The recognition Churchill mentioned came quietly. Charles Goodeve received the Order of the British Empire in 1943, though the citation mentioned only valuable services to the Admiralty. Tom Tuck received similar recognition. Most team members received no public acknowledgement during the war, their contributions hidden behind security classifications that would remain in place for decades. When Operation Neptune, the naval component of D-Day, launched on June 6, 1944, over 6,900 vessels crossed the Channel. Each carried degassing protection developed by Goodeve's team. Not a single Allied vessel was lost to magnetic mines during the crossing or beach approach. The technology had passed its greatest test. The silent battle against magnetic mines represented the perfect example of what Churchill called the Wizard War, the scientific struggle that paralleled traditional combat. In this shadow conflict, the forbidden trick had proven decisive. September 1995. Royal Navy Museum, Portsmouth. The rusted fragment of magnetic mine casing, preserved in a glass display case, drew little attention from visitors. Nearby, more dramatic exhibits, the polished brass of HMS Victory, the battle ensigns of Trafalgar, commanded greater interest. Yet this corroded piece of metal represented one of the war's most decisive technological battles. 50 years after VE Day, the story of degassing remained largely untold. Charles Goodeve never received the public recognition his contributions warranted. After the war, he returned to academic life, becoming a professor at University College London and director of the British Iron and Steel Research Association. He died in 1980 at age 75, his wartime achievements mentioned only briefly in his Times obituary. Tom Tuck followed a similar path, returning to Cambridge University, where he made significant contributions to nuclear physics before his death in 1985. In a rare 1970 interview for the Imperial War Museum's Oral History Collection, Goodeve reflected on the degassing program's legacy. "We faced what appeared an insurmountable problem: how to make thousands of steel ships non-magnetic almost overnight. The textbook said it couldn't be done, but war has a way of making the impossible necessary. The technology developed under wartime pressure continued evolving in peacetime. Modern naval vessels still carried degaussing systems, though vastly more sophisticated than their wartime predecessors. Computer-controlled coils automatically adjust to counteract a ship's changing magnetic signature as it moves through different magnetic latitudes. The fundamental principles remain those discovered by Goodeve's team under the pressure of national survival. Beyond naval applications, the degaussing breakthrough influenced civilian technologies. Medical imaging, including magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, employs principles of magnetic field manipulation pioneered during the war. Airport security systems use similar technology to detect metallic objects. The science of electromagnetic field control, considered impractical before 1939, became a foundational discipline with wide-ranging applications. The most profound legacy, however, was methodological. The forbidden trick of degaussing demonstrated that scientific impossibilities often represent merely temporary limitations in understanding or approach. When conventional wisdom declared a problem unsolvable, Goodeve's team sought unconventional solutions. This approach, challenging established limitations under pressure of necessity, became a template for wartime scientific breakthroughs from radar to nuclear fission. By 1995, declassification finally allowed the full story to emerge. Historical assessments concluded that without degaussing, Britain might have lost the Battle of the Atlantic. German magnetic mines could have severed supply lines, starving the island nation into surrender before American entry into the war. The technology saved an estimated 2,500 ships and 25,000 lives throughout the conflict. Vice Admiral Sir Louis Le Bailly, former Director of Naval Intelligence, wrote in his memoirs, "The degaussing breakthrough represented the perfect example of British scientific ingenuity under pressure. It wasn't glamorous like radar or the atomic bomb, but it saved countless lives and kept the sea lanes open when everything hung in the balance." Today's naval officers study degaussing as standard procedure, most unaware of the desperate innovation behind the technology. Modern warships incorporate electromagnetic silencing systems as fundamental design elements, not emergency countermeasures. What was once forbidden has become standard. The North Sea still occasionally yields its secrets. Every year, minesweeping operations recover wartime mines. Their magnetic sensors corroded, but sometimes still functional. Modern Royal Navy minesweepers employ degaussing principles unchanged in their fundamentals from those Goodeve developed. The lesson endures in military and scientific doctrine. When facing seemingly insurmountable problems, sometimes the solution lies in attempting what conventional wisdom forbids. The magnetic mine, deployed to strangle Britain through scientific advantage, instead spurred one of history's most remarkable examples of scientific countermeasure. The forbidden trick that erased magnetism didn't merely outsmart German minds, it rewrote the rules of what was possible.